Welcome back to another session of Stecker Studios. This is going to be part one of a three-part series on basic watercolor techniques. Today we'll be practicing the first four. This is our Crayola watercolor kit. It comes with watercolor wells that are replaceable and interchangeable so that you can order your colors any way you like. And it even comes with a decent brush. Now you're going to need 2 cups of water, one for clean and one for cleaning your brushes. Paper towel. And you're going to notice that we're also going to use the lid of our kit to mix all of our colors. The first thing we're going to do is set up a table for our 6 different techniques that we're going to practice. First, draw a line connecting the bottom of each of the holes on the top of your paper. Measure down 4 inches on the left and right side and connect across with a nice straight line. Next, we're going to measure in 3.5 inches from each side, make little measurement marks, and connect them to create 6 separate spaces. We're going to do a total of 12 watercolor exercises, so you'll need to set up 2 sheets the same exact way. Our first 4 we're going to see in this demonstration are wash, gradated wash, wet on dry, and finally wet on wet. Before we begin painting, it's a good idea to make sure our brush is clean. Swirl it around in your water container, rub it on the side of the container, and then rub your brush on a paper towel with a slight twisting motion to help maintain the point on the edge of your brush. As we prepare our first color, we want to wet the paint just a little bit inside the well, but not so wet that we have a puddle. We're going to take some of that paint, put it into our mixing area. We want the paint to be just wet enough so that it moves easily inside the mixing area. The first technique we're going to use is called wash. A wash is used to cover a large area quickly and evenly. Notice that we use the widest part of the brush possible by pushing the brush down from the toe all the way to the heel to cover as much space as possible. Try to cover the area as evenly as you can. Clean your brush, and we're going to skip over gradated wash for a moment and move on to step number 3, wet on dry. The reason being, we're going to create 3 layers, allowing each layer to dry in between. We're going to mix up some green and some yellow in order to create a nice yellow-green color for our first layer. We're going to be drawing a tree. Once we have our color mixed up, we're going to begin by drawing the outline of the tree first, giving it kind of a rough, natural shape. Next, we're going to fill in the inside of the tree, leaving a few holes to allow the background to show through. We're going to let this set up and dry and go back to gradated wash. Remember to clean your brush thoroughly in between each color you use to prevent contamination of your colors. We're going to mix up some blue, and we're going to do a series of washes starting with a nice full dark color. Remember to use the brush as wide as possible in order to cover as much ground as you can. For your second pass, you're going to add just a bit of water to your original mixing area and go over it again, adding more and more water each time. Make multiple passes, and you should notice that it gets lighter and lighter each time you add water to your wash. This is a great technique for creating skies. We're going to go back to wet on dry and add our second layer. This time we're going to use a medium green and cover 75% of the light section that we already painted. Make sure to allow enough of the yellow-green to shine through in order to show highlights and help create kind of a 3D feel that we're looking for. In order to create this section, it's a good idea to kind of flick your brush in different directions to create a natural leaf pattern. We're going to let that sit and dry, move on to wet on wet, and come back to add one more layer to our wet and dry technique. For wet on wet, we're going to use the primary colors and kind of experiment to see what happens. We're going to begin by wetting our paper first. And splash a little bit of color on into the wet paper. We're going to choose our 3 primary colors and splash these around on the wet paper and have a little fun and see what happens. You might notice that as soon as the wet paint touches the wet paper, it spreads out automatically by itself through capillary action. Have fun with this one. Play around with the colors and see what you get. Now we're going to go back to finish up our last layer of our wet on dry experiment. For this one, we're going to mix up a bunch of blue with our green to kind of create a nice dark shadowy layer. For this layer, we're only going to cover about 25% of the area we've already created, mostly on the bottom and mostly on the side of the tree, receiving the least amount of light. Again, flick your brush in different directions in order to create a leaf texture. Notice the difference between the wet on dry technique and the wet on wet technique. The wet on dry technique gives us added control when we use wet paint on a dry surface. However, the wet on wet technique allows the paint to flow very freely in different directions with less control. To finish off our tree, we're just going to add a little bit of a trunk, mixing up some brown. And we're going to also add a couple of branches poking out. Hope you've enjoyed practicing these techniques with us. Ultimately, this is the best way to learn to control watercolor. The more you practice, the more control you get, and the better you'll become. See you next time.